SEPS to BIM. Renee Tejan of the Department of Veterans Affairs recently stated, "Owners have rules for projects, but they are often written in a secret code only the initiated understand." In a typical project, the program requirements come from many different sources, all the way from paper documents, PDF files, information from project managers, websites that then get communicated to the architect to design and construct the facility. A typical stack of program requirement documents can be very large, with a lot of information embedded in a format that is not necessarily easy to read in a machine-readable format and translate into building information models for the designer to be more efficient at consuming the information and responding back with a design solution. The space and equipment planning system that is jointly used by the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Defense Health Agency from the Department of Defense defines space and equipment requirement for spaces for an entire facility. These standards have standard naming conventions for equipment and spaces and is dynamically updated as requirements change. It is also dynamically updated specifically to a project. So for example, in a project in one part of the world, it might have slightly different requirements or dramatically different requirements for an exam room such as this. This is all data that is available, and the data includes information about staffing and people and the equipment associated with spaces and department and functional areas that compose an entire facility, whether it's a smaller clinic or a very large million-square-foot hospital. The programming for a project has a ton of information, a lot of data that needs to be processed, and having it in a format that's easily understood is what is the strength of SEPS. So SEPS has been around for many years, and it's jointly used by the DoD and VA, and the output from a project, as a program manager for a project inputs requirements into SEPS, it asks questions such as departments and functional areas and spaces and what type of equipment, and the output that was handed to the design team was an Excel file or a static PDF document that then had to be consumed by the designers and turned into CAD or BIM files for the design. This is a very time-consuming process with a lot of data and a lot of room for error. 3 or 4 years ago, a project was started from the National Institute of Building Sciences for the DoD and VA, a strategic plan for SEPS, to say how can we update the use of SEPS and make it more web-enabled, and more importantly, how can we take the data from SEPS and drive it into building information models and projects. So at a simple level, SEPS has tables about rooms and departments and equipment that gets continually updated, and that drives into projects. So the solution was to get down to the core data, make it accessible through web services, and automatically drive that into BIMs. As the program requirements changed, the building information models and the templates, the BIM templates, were also dynamically updated, not only for a single room, but for an entire department or an entire facility. This output could then be generated into BIMs. So the output from SEPS now is automatically structured in a way that BIMs can consume and automatically drive 3D and 2D data into the model. In addition to the project data, we also recommended that the SEPS core standards be publicly made available. In other words, anybody in the world can actually log in and see not just static PDF files of what a department or a space looks like, but actually download and look at the data and look at the BIMs for those templates. So as these owners update their information on a continual basis, these templates are also updated and available to the public. This triggers two things. One, obviously it helps to communicate the requirements, the standards, but it also engages the industry, the designers, the vendors, the suppliers, the equipment suppliers, on what the DoD and VA is thinking about as they design and construct facilities. The results are that the data is more directly connected to the projects, and the vendors and consultants out there are more directly associated with what the DoD and VA's needs are and provide them better services. And the one very interesting thing that has happened very rapidly actually is that this platform of the equipment, spaces, and project data from SEPS to BIM was used to continue for vendors to build their software applications on top of. So for example, SketchUp and ArchiCAD and BIM object that has equipment, medical equipment in it that aligns with SEPS now, and Atania, the medical equipment database, is associated with it. And then Codebook, and more recently TriWG, a medical equipment manufacturer, associated their equipment data with it. So many applications link to SEPS and provide value back to DoD and VA. Here's TriWG's solution sitting on top of the SEPS2BIM and the 1691 data, and made available to designers to use on their projects. The data lifecycle to operations is also important. As the owner defines the requirements or their rules at the very beginning of a project, it makes its way through design and into construction, and there are elements of the delivery of the data back to the owner that are very important for maintenance and operations. And it was also identified that as new equipment comes in, before the geometry is even ready, it's still very valuable to have the data associated with the requirement of that piece of equipment, even in a block format. In this case, these blue blocks that you see here are associated with SEPS data and made available regardless of if the geometry is fully detailed. Instructions are posted publicly on the VA TIL on how to use the SEPS2BIM process, and the tools and the templates and the objects and the data and how to access it. And these rules and standards, as were identified at the beginning of this presentation, are incredibly important to be clear so the project can support the needs of the owner. And more importantly, the single project that's delivered back to the owner is aligned with the entire portfolio and the standards that are used for managing multiple facilities worldwide for DoD and VA's case. You can find more on the SEPS2BIM.org website, including introductory videos and instructional videos on how to use this information. Here are some links to find that information. Thank you for your time.